I'd like to introduce our panellists here this morning. And to the left of me is Mark McLeod. He is the CEO of Country Education Partnerships. So he's sort of going to give us a bit of rural regional perspective for the conversation. To the left of him is Keisha Healy. And Keisha has actually stepped up this morning for us. We've had a late apology of two panellists. But Keisha comes to us today in her capacity as a youth advocate that works with schools and young people. To the left of Keisha is Paul Fry, and he's actually a current Parents Victoria board member, but he's also a wellbeing leader in out of the Gippsland region. And then to the left of Paul is Karen Dibbick, and she is the CEO of Association for Children with a Disability, commonly known as ACD. I should have done all the acronyms. And then followed next to Karen is Andrew Dalgleish, who is the current president of Victorian Primary Principals Association. And finally, but not last, is Meredith Peace, who is the president of the Australian Education Union Victoria branch. So thank you, panellists, for joining us, and we're really looking forward to a really solid conversation. And I'm Patricia Cavalios. I'm posing, Patricia, as a Q&A facilitator and moderator for this discussion around the state education and the road ahead. So, the question there, and it's up there, thank you, Alan. Why should the school resource standard, SRS, that's the acronym, be at 100% for public schools now, not by 2029? I'm going to throw to Andrew Douglas first.
Why by now? We've been waiting 12 years already for full 100% SRS. Now Stephen spoke earlier about we're on a pathway. The sad reality is the pathway for Victoria still by 2029 will only be 90.5% of the full SRS, and that's probably one of the biggest challenges we face. What we are seeing as we head into the NSRA negotiations is politics again between federal and states. Fundamentally, the federals currently fund 20%. States are expected to stump up the additional 80%. Now, part of that is our states and territories are the prime responsibility or provide the prime responsibility for the delivery of government education. The challenge that we have around needing that full funding is to close that gap for those that are the most disadvantaged, that have the greatest need. Now, we know that the greatest proportion of children in that need are in government schools. And it's very much around ensuring that we have the funding that comes into our schools actually getting through the classroom doors, because that's where it makes the greatest difference. You know, the challenges that sit there. Victoria nationally, if we look at our funding, we're about $1,000 or $1,100 lower than average across all other Australian states and territories. So we're one of the lowest, if not the lowest funded jurisdiction. The other thing that sits there, and this is from my primary perspective, if we look at the funding difference, it's around about $3,000 less per primary student than secondary student. Now that's a significant amount. But it's again, what are we going to do with that funding? And I think that's one of the key areas around the National School Reform Agreement is coming to a landing where we're targeting that funding to the students that need it the most. We're ensuring that our teachers have the appropriate resources, training, time to be able to deliver outstanding education. We have that time to continue to build those relationships between school, parents, community, which is critical to what we're doing. That's where we fit and sit. One of the things that I'm also involved in beyond the Victorian Principals Association is AGPA, which is the National Government Primary Principal Association. Now, we actually engaged Pasi Sahlberg and a research team at Melbourne University to put together a paper for us. So we did this back in November last year. We're about to release. The challenge we've got is that Pasi is actually one of the ministerial expert advisory panel members. So we're just doing some negotiations between Minister Clare's office as well when we publish that and push that out. And Trevor Cobbold, who's coming to speak with you, was part of that research work as well. And if we come back to we're not just looking at what is the greater good for our community, we're also looking at financially what is the greater good for Australia. And we know if we're investing at earlier levels, we're getting greater opportunities. So it's really a return on investment argument that we're looking at as well. And as parents, and this is the one I'll keep pushing, is you are voters. And it seems to be more and more evident that if we are to advocate collectively for the funding that our young people need, that it's going to be the voters that need to put the pressure on, as parents, as educators, as peak bodies, to ensure that our young people can receive the funding level, because it matters, not just educationally, but in connectedness, for them to be able to thrive.
So Meredith, what would you like to add to that?
Yeah, so to pick up Andrew's point, the involvement of everyone in our school communities and our broader communities in campaigning really ultimately to hold our political leaders to account. We've been successful in the AU's campaigning, both in the state election and the federal election, to get both the now current governments, the Albanese government and what was then the Andrews government, to commit to getting our schools to 100%. That's the first time we've been able to get both those levels of government to do that. What we need to do is get them to deliver on it, because we've, as Andrew's rightfully said, since we first pushed in the AU for that review of school funding, which resulted in the Gonski report and the Gonski funding model, which in many ways is still partially in place, but has been, I describe it as badly damaged by successive coalition governments at the national level. But some of the architecture is still very much there in legislation. We really need to get our political leaders to actually get us to 100%. 98% of our public schools in this country are not funded to the nationally agreed funding standard. Like, how is that acceptable when the majority of our non-government schools are fully or well in excess of that amount? The majority of our kids still go to public schools, and we need to make sure, as our campaign for every child very clearly says, we need to ensure that every child is given the same opportunity to thrive and get a high quality education. And at the moment in this country, we seem to think, or our political leaders seem to think, it's acceptable that one group of kids shouldn't be funded to the same level as others. And I think the most important answer I can give to Gail's question is, why do we need to do it? Because our kids are missing out on things that they have a right to. They're getting a high quality education. There's no question about that in our public schools. But things like tutoring programs. To be honest, our tutoring program here in Victoria would not have been funded if it hadn't been for that campaigning we've done over a long period of time to get additional funding, albeit that it's not enough, to be able to have smaller class sizes, to be able to provide additional support in a whole range of different ways to kids with learning challenges, with behavioural challenges, with disability, to kids who need to be extended. And it's interesting, I'm part of the national reference group on behalf of the AU that is providing advice to the National School Reform Review Group, and we met in Hobart yesterday. And it was good to hear, and in summing up the day's discussion, the Minister Clare, made the comment that many of the things we'd been talking about through the day focused on workforce shortages, focused on student wellbeing, and focused on how what are the kinds of programs we need to provide to our kids to support their learning. He made the comment, quite rightly, that all of these things stem from funding. We can't do them. And I think one of the most irritating things in all this debate that really, I'm sorry to admit it, John, does make me angry, is that whenever we talk about funding, we get accused of engaging in culture wars and complaining about why public schools haven't got the funding they need. Why do we think the non-government sector fights so hard and comes out so hard against us and in lobbying government? Because they want to hang on to their money. It is about money, and it is about making sure that our politicians deliver for all of our kids. And I'll say one final thing. There's lots of things about our students that we need this money for, but we're facing some really significant issues in our system: workforce shortages, unsustainable workloads for staff, capacity to attract and retain teachers in our schooling system. It is really important that governments have access to funding to be able to put in place the programs that will actually help address some of those issues, because they are also fundamental to our kids' learning. We haven't got a fully qualified staff member in every classroom, then to some degree our kids are missing out. And that just shouldn't be acceptable in a country like ours.
Thanks, Sarah. I won't go to every panelist on this topic because we've got lots of topics to talk about. I can come back on a couple of things. People have got burning issues. But Mark, from a rural and regional perspective, is there anything you wanted to add on the funding?
Well, I'm just going to jump ship because a lot of what I was said is probably about to say. I just think a real important thing we need, we've got 25-30% of our principals are rural Victoria acting units or so, new to the job. So that skill set of managing the resources and having an understanding, it's not just the money, but actually how to strategically think about the resources available to that principal. How do we make the best use of those seconds? It's just imperative that our system provides the training and skill set, working with school councils, and school council meetings for those parents who run them. God, 80% is so rigid. There's no room for some conversations, for this bigger picture thinking. And so some things need to change. And in rural Victoria, it's about schools working together. So if I can have the best chemistry teacher around, why can't Murrayville, why can't the small primary school like Underbull benefit from? So how do those schools work strategically and do things together to make the most of the resources they have? Because that's then an argument for the schools to say, we need that extra 30% because here's what we can do strategically. And for rural, it's also about what you can access. The mental health menu is a great example. Fantastic menu. For a lot of rural schools, there's 3. That's why you see so many therapy dogs in schools. Sometimes it's all they can access. So great, I've got 20 things on the list, but there's only 3 that at Swiss Creek we can actually access here. So I think there's some thinking that's going to make a better argument there. And there's some things the system can do. So